I wouldn't say that there is a rush, but we do see a sense of urgency to find an agreement because, as we saw, we are announcing a new data set of growth, which won't be great. The IMF is announcing a reduction of the growth numbers. So in that sense, like the urgency to act is definitely there. And I think the one of the things that every CEO that I speak with tells me is it's all about reducing uncertainty at some point, because at the moment, while nobody knows whether there will be a deal, what the deal will entail, investment decisions are being procrastinated, consumers are procrastinating consumption decisions. So at the end, from that perspective, it's bad for everyone.
So there's a Polish official has become a riskier borrower, a less creditworthy player over the last couple weeks?
I absolutely don't think so. I mean, of course, markets are reassessing things constantly around what bond yields characterize, but I don't have the impression that there's any reassessment of credit risk. The United States is the global reserve currency and will probably remain so for a very long period of time. Europe has to get its act together in terms of creating a capital markets union to create more depth and more liquidity in our own benchmark bonds. Germany contributes to that. But I think when we saw this adjustment to the announcement, yes, it was quite strong and it was volatile, but it was all orderly and very much, just the pricing in of new information, which is what markets are supposed to do.
I want to talk about Europe trying to maintain access to the market.
I can tell you a personal anecdote. My wife drives an American car.
What does she drive?
A BMW.
Okay.
Made. And it's
free trade, it works.
It works because it's a BMW made in Spartanburg, South Carolina, right? And it's true, and it's not making this up. I just spoke with the Minister of Finance from the state of Baden-Württemberg, which is the home of Mercedes, and his new official car is also an American car built in Chattanooga by Mercedes, right? So this global value chain, BMW is the biggest exporter of cars by value of the United States of America. So in that sense, this whole intricacy of the value chains show that there really isn't such a thing as a pure American, pure German. There's a few exceptions, of course, but the large OEMs from Germany are all very big players in the United States.
You think there'd be a way to get in?
Germany has been overly dependent on Russia for energy, on the United States for security, and on China for exports and imports. And so our fundamental structural problems are not only associated with the United States, they're also associated with the fact that we've over-relied on building stuff in Germany and exporting it to China. We've been over-reliant on importing energy from Russia and not diversifying enough. So we have more issues in our structural problems of our economy than only the issues that trump it. A big culmination point, namely the United States, is now very serious in saying we will demand Europe to do its own thing on defense. The first wave, by the way, already came as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So Germany, after Russia invaded Ukraine, in fact only 3 days afterwards, announced the constitutional change that would allow us to go to 2% NATO target, which we had neglected to do, to be fair, for 8 years since the NATO agreement in 2014 to 22. We fell short on that, but we fixed it within the last 3 years, and we are now at 2%. So we are fully in compliance with all of the international agreements that we have. But of course, we see now that the world is changing and that Europe will have to do a lot more than just meeting the NATO target of 2%. Namely, we will have to be able to build the European pillar of NATO to be so strong that it can make a much bigger contribution. So that will require a massive fiscal effort. Some estimates of our constitutional change mean that we will be raising about €1 trillion of debt in the next 10, 12 years roundabout. So that is about 20%, 25%, depending on which reference year you use, of our GDP. So it's a very substantial amount.
Is Germany culturally comfortable re-militarizing?
Yes.
If there's a point at which the capital markets in Europe can't sustain. Well, we will have you back next year. We'll check in, see how it's going. Thank you so much for joining us.
Very good. Many thanks.